in the midst of a huge transformation where our peers, communities, and workplaces are all really melding into one. Welcome to Reimagining Company Culture. My name is Christina Giordano. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. And today I'm excited to welcome our next guest onto the interview series, Jessica Williams. She is the Vice President of People at Refine Labs and founder and career coach with Hidden Gem Career Coaching. Jessica, thank you so much for being here. If you want to share a little about yourself, including your pronouns, and when you were younger, do you remember how you answered the question, what do you want to be when you grow up?
Absolutely. Well, hello, everyone. Yes, as she said, Jessica Williams, my pronouns are she and her. And I currently work, I say my 9 to 5 is the VP of people. And then my 5 to 9 is my career coaching business.
Okay.
So on the career coaching side, I specialize in helping specifically people of color, either if they want to get back in the workforce or if they're trying to transition into getting a promotion, whether that's writing their resume or doing mock interviews with them or prepping them even for performance reviews. I prep people for that as well. So that's something that is just like a passion for me. When I look back at 2020, I sat down with myself and thought, what am I doing? And I wanted to like reach my hand back out. I'm unfortunately used to being the only person that looks like me in the room. And so I want to change that. So part of that is me being in my role as a VP of people and focusing on how I can do that in an organization, but then also focusing on how I can do that for myself to help other people. And then your question about what I wanted to be, this one is actually very funny because as a child, I really wanted to be a model. And then that kind of morphed into me wanting to be like a little reality star. I used to be a big fan of the Real World. And so I even like auditioned and everything. And then I had an epiphany of like, I don't want my family to be embarrassed by what I'm doing on television.
Gosh.
So I decided against that and then went the corporate route. And now I work in HR, which is really funny. But yeah, I wanted to be a little reality star.
So funny. I love watching reality TV, but never imagine myself on there as well. And thank you for sharing your kind of personal journey to the work with a capital W, of reaching back out, helping folks, and really in your role too as VP of people, really being an architect for opportunity and accessibility too. I would love to dig in a little bit deeper to your personal journey to coaching, and is really what has led you up until this point with your 9 to 5 role as well for a VP of people at Refine Labs.
Yeah, absolutely. So the why behind the what for me is that actually my educational background, I wanted to go to medical school. So my undergrad is in psychology, sociology, and then I have a master's from the University of Sydney in international public health. So I decided to go abroad for my master's degree. And the entire plan was when I graduated, I was then going to move back to the States and go to medical school. At the end of your master's or any advanced degree, you've had enough. And so I had clearly had enough and decided I do not want to go back to school anymore. So I ended up moving to Houston and have a friend that works in HR. And she said, oh, I can get you this 6-month contract job. And so it literally started as a 6-month contract as a recruiter. And my thought process was in 6 months, maybe I'll have changed my mind. I want to go to medical school. But that never came. And so 6 months later, I ended up, coming on as a full-time employee and working as an HR generalist. And I had a manager who definitely was a mentor to me. So she took me under her wing and really taught me everything that she knew in HR and made me a true generalist. So in the fact that I was doing everything from payroll and benefits to employee relations, and I had my hand in everything. And that's kind of how I started my career, and I built it from there. But yeah, it's ironic because when I started in HR, I didn't even know what HR was. I had no insight into the business world. I was all focused on going to medical school. So it's ironic to look back, and sometimes I do laugh and think what if I would have gone to medical school? But I don't think that at that time in my life that I was ready. It wasn't the right thing for me. So I'm definitely happy with my decision.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that definitely makes sense in terms of the common thread of helping people as well. We talked about coaching and mentorship, specifically with mentors in your life, but I want to be really clear about what is the difference between really mentorship and coaching.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people use those words interchangeably, and I don't think they're the same thing. So
Yeah.
when I think of mentors that I've had, or even me mentoring other people, it's definitely more career focused and long term. So the mentor that I've had in my life right now, she's been my mentor for 8 years. So it's morphed into way more than just, oh, let me just help you with this one spot in your career if you're having a hard time. It has morphed way more than that. So it's very informal too. So our relationship has become very informal. We don't have set times that we meet. It's depending on what's going on in my life, what's going on in her life, when she's able to meet with me. And then another thing that I think is important when you think about like a mentor is, this is someone who, in my role, she's actually a chief people officer now. So she's where I want to be. So it's perfect because she can guide me, and she has guided me throughout my career. There were definitely moments in my career where I felt like I was a little bit stuck and like I didn't want to take that leap of faith. And she would advise, like, no, it's time for you to leave. You want to move up. And if you can't move up here, you need to leave, or you need to, whether it was like, oh, you need to go get this certification. This is a way to grow expand your knowledge. So pushing me in the right direction, also knowing that as I was moving up in my career, she was moving up too. So it's always like she's a couple of steps ahead of me of where I want to be. So it's a good guide. Whereas coaching, I feel like, is definitely more short term. Most mentors, you're not paying them, it's something they're doing out of the kindness of their heart. Whereas coaching, depending on the situation, you would be paying for it. And it's for like a short-term specific need. So for example, when I'm coaching my current clients, I'm coaching them on interview prepping, or if they need to be coached up into a new role or position. So it's short-term. I think of it more as like problem solving. So what is the problem you have right now? And then a coach can help coach you through how to get through that. And then once you're through that problem, normally that coaching relationship ceases to exist until you might need them again. Whereas a mentor, you guys might not talk every month, or even every other month, but when you need them, you can reach out to them. So it's much more of a conducive relationship. And I think people need both. There's a time and a place for everything. So you can have a mentor and still need a coach for certain aspects to push you through.
Absolutely. I think both are really essential resources, and understanding the nature of those relationships, when to reach out. And 8 years is a long time to know someone too. So
Oh
they
yeah.
understand your career and kind of your goals too, that could always be changing. You mentioned, and I think a lot of people are this way as well, in terms of having like no perception of human resources or what the field is, and like it's rapidly changing, and the language is turning more towards people and people architecture, people operations. And some people do have a positive connotation of what that means. Others are not quite sure when someone from a people ops team reaches out to talk to them. I want to ask, when you think of people operations, what's the first word that comes to mind? What's the perception for you?
When I think of people ops, I think of creativity. And I know that's going to throw some people off that are listening right now, but bear with me, because I actually think, the people ops team has the ability to be creative. If you look at everything that has happened in the last 2 years, we had to pivot. We had to go remote. That took a lot of creativity. Like, how are we going to do this? How are we, change management and planning this out? And I am actually one of those people. When I think of HR, I do think of like compliance and legal, and there's a place for that. So those things still have to get done. However, I don't think that has to be the overarching necessity for people operations. So I think innovation and creativity should be a part of it. My niche right now in my career is being in a startup. So I love being the first HR hire or the first people ops hire. See, I'm going back and forth. But being the first person in that role, you have the ability to build from the ground up. So for example, right now, one of our biggest things we're working on is getting a performance management system in place. They don't have that. So it's the ability to, what problem are we trying to solve? What are we trying to get to? And how is this going to impact the business? So what's the cost? And then how is this going to impact the employee life cycle and, the experience that they're having working there. So I do think it's twofold, but I definitely understand when people, go back and forth. And I even do it in conversations. I'll use HR and then use people ops in the same sentence.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there are a lot of different terms, but understanding there's so much room for designing, creativity,
Yes.
innovation, like you were talking about, and so many of these conversations, I think it's really hopeful to talk about, the different initiatives that are being run, and also how you think about training folks who are other culture conduits outside of the team too. So people managers, new folks joining the team. I want to ask from your perspective as a coach in helping people do their best work and reach their full potential. Some people who are individual contributors say, I am ready to take the next step, and my next step is to be a people manager. But I think that a lot of folks are not just born ready to manage people. It takes some resources. What is the best way to really resource or train new people managers who are really effective?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, but I do want to acknowledge one thing and step back for a minute,
Yeah.
because I do not think that everyone needs to be a manager.
Mm-hmm.
I truly don't think, like, some people don't want to be a manager, but they feel like that's the only way to move up. And in some
Right.
organizations, unfortunately, they don't have like an expert or individual contributor track. And so I want to acknowledge that, like, I don't think this is everyone's calling. And I actually don't think that people that don't want to be a manager, that they shouldn't do it. I actively tell my team, like, if that is not your calling, please don't do it. Please don't do that to yourself or to anybody else. But for the people that actually want to, education is key. Unfortunately, I've seen a lot of statistics where people that are put in a role to lead other people, normally about 10% of them actually have some type of training. That's 90% of people that were just like, figure it out, like, oh, you're good at XYZ. So now you're going to lead a team of people that do XYZ, and good luck. Or there might be some e-learning trainings, which that's better than nothing, but that's not really soaking up what they need. So the thing that I've seen that helps the most is training, but training in like cohort groups. So putting people in a team and having them go through trainings together. And when I say trainings, I don't mean e-learnings. I mean like live trainings where they're learning something together. We recently did this at Refine Labs, where we did a live training on psychological safety. And the style of the meeting was very conversational. We even did an exercise where everyone said a mistake that they recently made. We got literally everyone that's a leader said, tell me a mistake that you've recently made, and like how what did you do about it? And it was powerful to hear, and I even kicked us off with a mistake that I had made.
Right.
And so it's powerful to hear, and then to have that cohort of people to lean on. So even after the training is over, whether that's a Slack channel or you guys are meeting like once a month to just talk, that collaboration helps people grow as leaders. I'm also a big fan of outside training. So I don't think that, depending on the size of your people department, that you have to take on all these initiatives and do all the trainings yourself. 100% budget out sending people to trainings, whether that's on communication. I recently saw a training online that I thought was very interesting about digital presence.
Okay.
Specifically now, since, a lot of people are remote,
Yeah.
Refine Labs is 100% distributed workforce. So everyone's wherever they want to be. So we're going to do a series on digital presence next, because how are you showing up to people, specifically to your team? Do they feel psychologically safe to talk to you? So I think there's a lot of ways to do it, but I do want to just acknowledge, if you don't want to be a manager, please don't do it. And if you are a leader and the thing that you're giving people when they become managers is just an e-learning course, I definitely think that's not effective.
Absolutely. I like what you said about the cohort conversations and training, and just being able to lead with empathy as well, in terms of owning up to mistakes and sharing them and really modeling that on your team. And also, there are people, like you said, you don't have to shoulder all of the work as a people team, or, the only people manager, anything like that. There are people who are subject matter experts on this work, and you can bring them in to help do this kind of live training. You mentioned psychological safety a couple times, and it's definitely something that we believe in, and just this culture of feedback. And I know one of the topics that I was excited to discuss with you today too is around diversity, equity, and inclusion, and the philosophy at Refine Labs. What is kind of the goals or initiatives that you're focusing on right now as it relates to creating an equitable workplace with that psychological safety?
Yeah. So when I started with the company, which, just for reference, I've only been with the company for 2 months. So it's been a whirlwind. It feels like many
Yeah.
years. But it's only actually been 2 months. But in the span of the 2 months, one of my big things, even when I was interviewing for the role, was to ask about DE&I. What are you guys doing? What do you want to do differently? And they were very clear with me, like, hey, this is something that we're working on, and we would want you to lead it. So come in and let us know what we could do. And the first thing that I ended up doing the first 2 weeks that I was there was say, we need to be transparent. So we need to just go out in front of our employees and tell them, this is where we are. These are current statistics, and this is how we want to move forward. And I think a lot of times people feel the need, if the numbers are not where they want them to be, to kind of hide that information.
Right.
And I wholeheartedly disagree. Do not do that. Just say what it is, because what happens is people can go on the org chart, they can go look at the LinkedIn, they will calculate the numbers themselves. Like I've done it before. When I was looking at a job, like I'll just do the calculations myself. So it's better to just be upfront and be transparent. So that was the first thing. We have a staff meeting, and every single month I talk about the numbers, and then we have set goals. So since we are 100% distributed, we didn't want to set our goals based on like a specific location. So at past employers, if I'm located in the Dallas area, so I would say, okay, we want our demographics to look like Dallas. Whereas we don't do it that way. We're now saying we want our demographics to look like the United States. So, the United States, roughly in different numbers everywhere, but roughly 50% women, roughly 50% people of color. And so that is our goal, to be at 50%, 50%. And so where we are right now, we're getting really close. And we also dive a little bit deeper into the leadership team, because it's one thing to throw out diversity numbers. And we've seen those graphics where you see where it's like, oh, everyone who's diverse is, at the bottom of the pyramid. And then as you go up, there's less diversity. So we call that out too. Like, what is the leadership numbers? And right now we are about 70% women on the leadership team. And I think about 25% professionals of color. So our aim is to get more people of color on the leadership team. So we've been very transparent, and I think that's the number one thing. And then action items. So how are we holding people accountable? Because you can say you want diversity all day. We see the statements, you could go to Twitter and see every company's public statement, but what are they really doing? So the way that I'm going to start tackling this is in recruitment. So that's kind of the main focus right now. And probably for Q1 2022 is recruitment. So we looked at our job descriptions. Are they inclusive? There are a lot of applications online where you can go and put in your job description, and it'll tell you, if it's very male dominant or if you're not being inclusive in your language. And so we've done that. So we've looked at all of our job descriptions. The next step is, where are we getting people from? So we're a marketing, so we normally go after people on LinkedIn, but now we're looking at other things like the Mom Project. There's another organization called Chronically Capable, which is specifically for people that are chronically ill. So they might have some type of disability. So what are the job boards that we're looking at? So I think that's the place to start. And then it's kind of twofold, because looking outside is one thing, but also looking inside. So we are very open about talking about diversity, but also ERGs, so employee resource groups. How are we helping people have some sort of community when they get into the organization? Because as we know, diversity is the number. Inclusion is, do people feel included when they actually get in the door? So I would hate to bring all these people in and then they get here and they say, this is not an inclusive culture. So that is something that we have to work on at the same time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It sounds like it's a holistic strategy too, in terms of recruitment, and then retaining the folks that are there and making sure that they feel included and that they belong at the organization. And you mentioned kind of leadership. And I have a question around accountability too, for folks who are not on your team or who are not, executives at the company as well. How should we measure the effectiveness of for example, people managers, and practicing equity-driven leadership, and really have that mindset as they're moving through their kind of day-to-day processes, no matter what department they're in?
I think this is a really good question, and it's a hot button issue, because a lot of times, unfortunately, when we think of like D&I, we think, oh, that's the people ops team. Like they need to be doing that. And I can tell you right now, we can help lead the way, but it is everyone's responsibility. So every leader, every person at the organization has a responsibility in this, but the accountability part is key. And my stance on this is looking at where people are leaving. And this is twofold as well, because if you go and you look at, one specific manager and they have people that are actively exiting the organization, there is normally something there. So that's one way to dig a little bit deeper on, is it their management style? Is it their communication? What is going on here to cause people to leave? And then to even look at people that are, okay, look at your professionals of color. First of all, where are they in the organization? So are they in like one specific group? And if that's not the case, that's fine. That's actually a great thing. But two, ask them about their leadership. So another thing with psychological safety is, I think the only way to truly understand is to ask people. So to literally reach out to them and ask them, what is going on? What is your experience here? How could we make it better? And then let's be honest, when things get tied to bonuses or money, things get fixed. So tying diversity to, someone's bonus or their numbers or how they're going to be looked at when it comes to promotions, I've seen it happen and it's magic. You think it's literally when you start talking about like, hey, well, part of getting promoted here is equity and inclusion. So what have you done to help us in this area, or what are you personally working on? And if you can't answer these questions, then you don't need to be promoted. So when you tie that to people's money, it's magic. I don't know how, but it, abracadabra, it happens.
That motivation all of a sudden as well. No, I think that definitely is a motivator and just a way to operationalize equity too, to make sure that everybody is thinking about it as well, that everybody has the power to kind of change something they're doing tomorrow and really impact someone's experience. I also want to ask specifically, you mentioned in a distributed work environment, you're not seeing folks every day or interacting with them, not reading body language necessarily, so you don't know if they really feel included or if they belong. Can you give an example of how folks, can ensure they are cultivating an inclusive workspace? I've heard in some conversations that they have, video off meetings or no internal meeting days, and just they have those expectations. But I just wanted to ask what you're seeing.
Yeah, I love all of those ideas. And one extra thing that I just popped in my head was also 360 reviews reveal what's going on. So getting people to have reviews from people that report to them and their managers shows you a more holistic picture of how they're managing people that might be people of color or other people, so that you can see what's going on. But to this question, I think it has to be intentional. So the thing about being 100% distributed is that like, there's no way I'm just going to walk by you. Like I might only actually see you in person. We have offsites once a year. So if you only are going to see someone in person once a year, the intention has to be there. So we do have no meeting Fridays, where Fridays, like it is blocked off from day one. Like literally my first week, I was like, why is my whole Friday blocked off? And it is because that's the days that you can get projects done. If you need to, you could take the day if your work is done, we are completely open to that. Another thing is not having your camera on. So, there's a lot of statistics right now about people feeling performative when they have to have their camera on. And like, it's actually really unnatural to look at yourself all day. And so if you're in Zoom meetings all day, you're looking at yourself all day, and it's causing people to have some complexes. So you don't have to explain why you don't want your camera on. So just don't turn your camera on if you're not feeling it. We also start our meetings off with like red, yellow, green. So like you can say like, hey, I'm red today. And you don't even have to go into detail on why you're red or why you're not feeling up to it today. But it's a way for your leader to know what's going on. And, you can approach someone differently when you know that they're having a red day, they're not feeling up to it. Then if, someone's happy-go-lucky green, asking them to do an extra project might not be so bad on that day. Another thing is we have like a no interruption rule. So if someone's talking, don't interrupt them. And an easy way to do that on Zoom is to use the raise hand feature, like use technology to your advantage. But we do that because I've seen it before in previous employers where there's normally one dominant person in the group and they're interrupting people left and right. And on a Zoom, it's harder to then tell that person to like, oh, calm down. But I'm not going to lie. I have been that leader that will private message them and be like, you need to stop. Like this person is talking, you need to stop. So another part of it is leadership, like owning it. Like I have no problem being the person to say like, hey, I don't think that this is appropriate, or we need to do this a different way. So it has to be intentional.
Absolutely. I think those are really good intentional examples too, in terms of setting up non-negotiables for the company and also on a leadership level as well. I think it's definitely different if you message someone individually as opposed to someone who just joined the company and doesn't know if they can speak up or not. There's just different dynamics as well. We've talked a little bit about listening. You mentioned 360 reviews and really asking people how they're feeling as well, especially in regards to their people manager and their team. But I want to kind of ask you, how do you see this employee feedback management as a really important tool of building trust at the company and also, manifesting in other ways outside of just the feedback?
Yeah, so feedback is, it sometimes can be a dirty word, and in the people
Yeah,
HR mind frame, like people do not like employee engagement surveys and all of those things. But I actually do. I think if done the right way, and that's the key, done the right way, you can get helpful information. So one of the things that we do is we do them on a quarterly basis. So, some companies only do it on an annual basis, and it's like this larger than life, gather all the data that you can find. And we break it down into different chunks. So every quarter we do an engagement survey. Within a week, so a week after we take that survey, we present the data.
okay.
So there's a quick turnaround. So we want people to see, like, this is what people are saying. And when we present the data, we always give 3 action plans. So like, these are the things that we are going to work on in this quarter. We do not have an all-inclusive list of like, this is everything that everyone wants, and we're going to try to work on all of it. That is not realistic. So it's actually like, okay, what do you need right now? So for example, if we want improvements in our benefits package, let's work on that. And that's something that has come up that we worked on, we fixed it, and then following up and saying when things are done. A lot of times it's like this elusive, you took a survey, but you don't see any change. And no one ever brought it up again. So that's why people get a little disgruntled and they don't want to take the survey and tell the truth. So it speaks volumes, but I think doing it in smaller chunks, it's literally, when we do it, it's only 10 questions. So we're not asking you to answer 50 questions and everything you've ever thought of the last 12 months. It's 3 months. What do you need right now? How can we make your life better? And then put it in action.
Absolutely. I think checking in with folks on a more regular basis is really important. And also a year doesn't go by and you hear about, the feedback that you got last year as well. There's that two-way communication, I think, is so important. And even if something can't be done right now, sharing what the priorities are, what we heard, and that active listening is so important. I know we talked about a couple different strategies in your kind of personal journey to this work as well. So I want to ask kind of your opinion about what you're seeing. So not necessarily at Refined Labs, but what are your like common mistakes you're seeing companies make either in their specific people or diversity, equity, inclusion strategy that might be cautionary tales or just something that you wish you weren't seeing?
Oh yeah, there's a lot of cautionary tales. One that I think a lot of people make when they think about diversity and inclusion is false promises. Like they really, and I actually think when people make these statements that they want to do the right thing, like they want to hit these numbers, but they're making it so unrealistic and the time frames so small. So if you're a company who says right now you are at like 20% professionals of color and you want to get to 50%, to say that you're going to do that in the next 6 months is not real. That it's not going to happen. And I'll just leave it at that. Because I'm like, there's just so much to unpack there. But I think being realistic, and also to my point earlier about transparency, and like we give these numbers out every month, be transparent about what's going on. So for example, there was a time where I was like, oh, well, maybe we should go after this certain job board. And it just didn't work out in our favor. So I told everyone like, hey, we tried this job board. We weren't able to find people that were the roles that we needed. So now we're going to try something else. So I even think showing effort, so showing that you're trying, even if what you tried was not successful, is a step in the right direction. And I feel, again, a lot of people like hold those cards close to the chest, like, oh, we don't want to show that we made a mistake. Well, now people just think that you aren't trying because they don't know what's going on. So I think that's part of it. I also think sometimes when the senior leadership is not truly bought in. So if your senior leadership team is not bought in and it's just kind of like, oh, well, this is something the people ops team needs to handle, it won't work. They can try all they want. And I just think in the long run, if they're not bought in and they don't see the value, long term, it's not going to stick. And also there is a business case for diversity. So I even think like there is a business case for why you need innovation and why it helps long term. So even taking that stance of this is how this is going to impact the business and innovation is the right thing to do.
Absolutely. I think that senior leadership buy-in is really important. I think that goes again to everyone having an equity-driven mindset, not just people, team leaders, and just folks in the organization across the board should have that investment in inclusion too. I asked specific questions around company culture, but the next question I have is vague on purpose because I would love to know what is taking up the most brain space in your mind, or what's the next problem or situation you're currently trying to solve?
Yeah, I smile at that because I tend to have my best thoughts in the middle of the night. I don't know what it is about my relaxing mind that makes me come up with 1,000 ideas. So actually, a funny thing is I have a notes in my phone that is literally just for ideas that I come up with randomly. So the thing that is taking up the most space in my brain right now is recruitment. So kind of to my point earlier, making sure that our recruitment practice is equitable. So we're doing the right things, but also that we are not moving too fast. So we're an early stage company and we're growing rapidly, which is a great thing, but sometimes that comes with needing to be things go very fastly. So it need things to speed up, but that's not really good for employee experience. So that can be something that is very mindful of like, okay, how are we making people feel? You know, we need people, but we want them to feel like we've thought it through, their onboarding process is thoughtful and all of those things. So that's one thing. Definitely diversity and inclusion is top of mind for me. Like, how are we going about it and making sure that our current employees feel like they're seen and heard? And then our leadership team, I want them to feel like they're supported. Right now I have a small team, so it's just me and 3 other people that are supporting them. So how are we doing that and being intentional? So making sure that they feel like they can reach out to us and that we can support them, whatever may come their way, because we do actually have a lot of new leaders. So we have a lot of people that, you know, maybe this is their first leadership role. And that comes with its own like caveats that I definitely keeps me up at night because I want there to be like leadership training, and I like training, but I'm not a professional trainer. So I think that that's something that definitely is keeping me up. And then final thing is infrastructure. Since we're an early startup, we don't have a lot of the people ops infrastructure in place. So one of the things that we recently did was get an ATS, which is like major because it's like we were housing everything in Google Docs. So even getting an ATS system has been helpful. So the infrastructure is a big part of it. And once we have that in place, I think we're going to be smooth.
Absolutely. Scaling intentionally. And I think making sure that the structure is built so everybody feels like they're included, and the recruitment process that you were talking about. A lot to think about. Jessica, is there anything that I didn't ask you that you want to share, or maybe one key takeaway you want to bold, underscore, highlight for folks who are listening to our conversation here today?
Yeah, I think I know that as like a people ops professional, when I listen to podcasts like this, one of the things I always want to just point out to people is that I know that there's a lot of burnout going on in our profession. And so like put yourself first, like think about what you need as well. Like I said, I literally have a notes app for ideas that come to me in the middle of the night. So I'm like always thinking about ways that we can improve, but I also am a firm believer in self-care and whatever that might mean to you, whether that's time off or like family time, whatever that means. So that would be my one like key takeaway, that especially if you are a person of color and you've taken on something in the DE&I space, that is a lot of emotional labor that you are not being compensated for, no matter what your salary is, that you're not being compensated for. So keep that in mind, like you're doing the work that, you know, is passion for you. And so I applaud that, but also put yourself first. And so one of my favorite quotes from Toni Morrison is, "You are your best thing." So keep that in mind. Like, and I even remind myself that sometimes, like I write it down on pieces of paper, like you are your best thing. And just remember that the effort that you're giving, like it's recognized, like we see you, you're making an impact, and just keep that in your heart.
That's a really hopeful message to end on, a good call to action too, to make sure that especially in this work, you're being gentle with yourself as well, and just taking that time, because you can't pour from an empty cup.
Absolutely.
I think. Thank you so much, Jessica, for being on Reimagining Company Culture. I really enjoyed our conversation here today.
Yeah, absolutely. This was fun.
Absolutely. And as a reminder for folks who are listening, at AllVoices, we really believe in that employee feedback management as a requirement for the company to succeed on a whole. Have a good rest of your afternoon, everyone.